I'm just going to promote you to panelist. I'm hoping that that's happening. Here's Sophie. Sophie, please, you've unmuted yourself. Brilliant. And we can see you. Even better. Welcome to the panel.
Thank you.
Evening. Nice to see you. So first question from the attendees is from Lisa Lichtenstein. Could you repeat what you said about beta blockers? Are they bad or good for Dupuytren's?
So they were positively associated, meaning that they were bad for Dupuytren's, but it's an association, it's not a causation. So we have to be careful in interpreting these results.
Yeah, okay. So I had a question that's kind of related a little bit to that association versus causation. Have you thought about confounders in this analysis? You sort of mentioned them in your limitations, but I'm thinking in particular about diabetes as a confounder. Were you able to measure that in your population?
We have thought about confounders, and we decided to include smoking behavior and alcohol as confounders in the model. Diabetes, however, we were not entirely sure about. First of all, we only have diabetes yes or no and not the type, which was a downfall of the study. And second of all, I'm not actually quite sure if diabetes is a confounder or if it's actually a disease that occurs together with Dupuytren's, but is not causally related. We're not sure. So
yeah, so I think that's true. I mean, it's certainly been associated in multiple studies with Dupuytren's, but of course the patient populations who have both look quite similar. And hopefully we'll be able to disentangle that with some future studies that we have planned. I just wondered though, is there and I'm kind of reaching the end of my medical knowledge here, is there a particular indication for ACE inhibitors as opposed to beta blockers? So for example, in patients with hypertension plus other cardiovascular diseases or plus other metabolic diseases, would they more likely be prescribed beta blockers or more likely be prescribed ACE inhibitors, and therefore that confounds your results?
I have to dig into my knowledge also. I believe that there's a standard in the Netherlands that builds up the types of medication you can use. I'm not very sure which one comes first, but it could be, and I think that's one of the pitfalls of our study. We're not too certain if these associations are driven by other factors or perhaps other medications are also prescribed. We did look at statins, for example, but they were not significantly associated. So we're not too certain. And that's why I think it's a very nice pilot study, but it has to be replicated in another cohort.
Yeah, okay. And I think there are some big epidemiological cohorts becoming available around the world, particularly the Odyssey Consortium, and that's exactly the kind of question that they can answer.
Mm-hmm. The other thing
another question. Yeah, sorry, Charlie, go on.
In terms of severity, you're using the 2-Biana scale, and so one option would be to see if the 2-Biana score divided by age, how that correlated. Just because there seems to be a relationship, and you might be measuring age rather than absolute contracture. Mm-hmm. Very interesting stuff.
Age was actually also taken into the model.
Oh, good.
Okay, so Lisa's wondering if she's rolling the dice with Dupuytren's progression, if she's taking beta blockers. I think that's probably something to discuss with your physician in person. David O'Gorman, can you repeat your interpretation of the link between angiotensin receptor blockers and TGF-beta overexpression SNPs? So that was the part of the analysis where the TGF-beta SNPs modulated the response to angiotensin receptor blockers, I think.
Yes. So the hypothesis is that angiotensin influences TGF-beta concentrations systemically. But there are certain SNPs that also influence TGF-beta concentration systemically. And the thought is that if angiotensin receptor blockers lower TGF-beta, but TGF-beta can be higher in certain people carrying those SNPs, that these effects actually cancel out each other. And that's what we observed.
Okay, thank you. Stephanie Chafee is confused. Are ACE inhibitors better or worse, I think, compared to angiotensin receptor blockers? And probably in the context of giving or contributing to Dupuytren's disease development or progression.
Yeah, so ACE inhibitors were not significantly associated to disease severity, and angiotensin receptor blockers were. So we see that if people use angiotensin receptor blockers, they have less severe disease, but still, it's an association. You cannot derive causal relationships.
Yeah, of course. Do you think then there's a differential effect of angiotensin receptor 1 and 2 in this context?
It could very well be. I'm not sure, actually.
Yeah, I suppose that's maybe for another study. Okay, I think we've covered all the questions from the floor. So Sophie, if you wouldn't mind staying with us as a panelist, and we will play your second talk of the evening.